A very good afternoon. You're watching Lunchtime News on TV1 for the Newsfirst team and Mariam Ganavijaya. Before we head on to our stories in detail, here is a look at your headlines.
Former President Maithripala Sirisena apologizes to Easter attack victims.
දෙවියන් වහන්සේ වෙනුවෙන් විශේෂයෙන්ම සමාව ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා මගේ පාලන කාලය තුල මගේ රටේ වැඩි සිද්ධියක් වීම පිළිබඳව.
Cabinet grants approval to amend the Social Security Contribution Levy Act. Expenditure in January greater than revenue. The President informs the Cabinet in a special report. Vasantha Mudalige in court today. Silent protest staged, demanding his release. Heavy showers, about 150 millimeters expected. Naval and fishing communities advised not to venture into the sea.
On to your lead story this afternoon, former President Maithripala Sirisena has apologized to the victims of the 2019 Easter Sunday attacks.
මම දන්නා පරිදි කිසිසේත්ම කතෝලික ජනතාව
As far as I am aware, the Catholic community has no hatred towards me. As a person who read the Holy Bible since age 15, I sincerely apologize to such a tragedy taking place during my tenure, and I apologize to those who died and were injured. I also apologize to the Catholic community for this tragedy taking place during my tenure while I was not aware of it, and for the loss of life. The ruling does not say that I have committed an offence, but that the President is also accountable to the offences committed by the officers appointed by the President. That is my connection to the case.
The former President also announced that he would contest the next presidential election.
Nelson Mandela දකුණු අප්‍රිකාවේ නායකයා.
Nelson Mandela was the former leader of South Africa. He was imprisoned for 27 years. After his release, the people of South Africa made him the president. Therefore, I would like to state that I will not back down from anything. I do not fear conspiracies. I respect the judiciary. I respect the law. I bow down to the judiciary. However, I have studied the character of Nelson Mandela, and no matter what torture I have to endure, with the support of my party, I will contest the upcoming presidential election and I will win.
මම ඉදිරි ජනාධිපතිවරණයක් තරඟ කරනවායි කියන එක මම බොහොම පැහැදිලිව කියන්නට ඕනේ.
The Colombo Chief Magistrate Court is expected to deliver its ruling on bail for Vasantha Mudalige, the convener of the Inter-University Students' Federation. Vasantha Mudalige, the convener of the Inter-University Students' Federation, was escorted to the Colombo Chief Magistrate Court on Tuesday morning. Mudalige was arrested under the provisions of the Prevention of Terrorism Act and remains in remand custody pending advice from the Attorney General. In the meantime, activists from the Inter-University Students' Federation engaged in a silent protest opposite the Colombo Chief Magistrates Court when IUSF convener Vasantha Mudalige was escorted to the court. The Keselwatha police had sought an order from court to prevent the silent protest from continuing, citing that it inconvenienced the public. However, the Colombo Chief Magistrate Prasanna Alvis rejected the request and advised the police to act as per the powers vested with Sri Lanka police if the protest was in fact an inconvenience to the public. The Colombo Chief Magistrate pointed out that court orders were not necessary for it. Moving on, Cabinet has granted approval to amend the Social Security Contribution Levy Act.
The President, as the Finance Minister, presented amendments to the Social Security Contribution Levy Act. The tax is levied at the rate of 2.5% on the annual turnover of more than 120 million rupees. The Finance Ministry had received information that some of the exporters with a small profit margin cannot continue with their business when they pay the 2.5% tax. Accordingly, it was decided to study the matter and present amendments to lift the tax. The Cabinet granted approval for those amendments to be presented to the Parliament for approval. Following the amendments, certain entities and individuals will be exempted from this tax.
සමහර ආයතන ඒ බද්දෙන් ආයතන හා පුද්ගලයන් ඒ බද්දෙන් නිදහස් වෙනවා ඒකී සංශෝධන වලින් පසු.
In more news-making headlines this afternoon, Sri Lanka President Ranil Wickremesinghe had presented a special report to the Cabinet detailing the government expenses for the month of January. Cabinet spokesperson Minister Bantula Gunawardena elaborated during Tuesday's Cabinet briefing.
තිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා note to the cabinet කියලා control of expenditure යනුවෙන් පත්‍රිකාවක් ඉදිරිපත් කළා රජයේ වියදම් පාලනය කිරීම සම්බන්ධයෙන්. ජනාධිපතිතුමා ඊයේ දිනේදී කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයට දැනුම් දුන්නා ජනවාරි මාසයේදී ආදායම වශයෙන් ලැබිලා තියෙන්නේ දේශීය ආදායම් දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවත් රේගු දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවත් සොරාබදු දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවත් සියලුම මාර්ගවලින් ලැබිලා තියෙන්නේ බිලියන 150.
The President presented a cabinet paper titled Note to the Cabinet on Controlling the Government Expenses. The President informed the Cabinet Ministers that the revenue of January collected from the Inland Revenue Department, Sri Lanka Customs and the Excise Department was 158.7 billion rupees. 87.4 billion rupees was spent on salaries and another 29.5 billion rupees was spent on the pension and samurdhi. Another 10.8 billion rupees was spent on other expenses. Further, there is a capital payment of 21 billion rupees with an additional 377.6 billion rupees for debt servicing for January. Accordingly, the total expenditure stood at 368.7 billion rupees. Anyone could understand that we cannot spend 368 billion rupees with only 158 billion rupees as revenue. The deficit was bridged by obtaining loans and by issuing treasury bonds and treasury bills, along with an overdraft assistance delivered by the central bank. This is the reality. Our expenditure is more than double of what we generate as income. The President noted that all the ministry secretaries are committed to manage these expenses. They have signed an agreement to control the expenses and work towards facing this tough situation. When that was announced, a journalist had written a poem about it.
නෑබෑ අමාරුයි ඉවසිය යුතු පාම කියමින් රජයේ ජනතාවට වදදීම ඉවසා එදත් බැරි තැන දැක රැවටීම නවත්විඩු නොහැක ජනතාවගේ නැගිටීම.
If there is another stream of generating an additional income or to cut down on the expenses, we can consider those options.
තවදුරටත් අඩු කරන ක්‍රමයක් තියෙනවා කියලා පැහැදිලි කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් අපිට ඒ පිළිබඳව සලකා බලන්න පුළුවන්.
Will the government take steps to amend the new income tax? Questions were raised on the matter at the cabinet media briefing.
මේ දවස්වල බදු ඉහළදැමීම සමයට එරෙහිව ගොඩක් අය උද්ඝෝෂණ කරනවා විශේෂයෙන්ම ලංකා ඛනිජ තෙල් සංස්ථාව ලංකා විදුලි මණ්ඩලය හා ලංකා වරාය සේවකයෝ මේගොල්ලෝ දැන් මේ දවස්වල දිගටම උද්ඝෝෂණය පවත්වනවා මොනවාරි සංශෝධනයක් එහෙම කරන්න අදහසක් තියෙනවද මේ සම්බන්ධව කතා කරාද කැබිනට්ුවේ
අලුත් බදු පනත මගින් රාජ්‍ය සේවකයන් පුද්ගලිකාංශයේ සේවකාරකාදීන්.
It is true that the new tax policy has added more burden to the public and private sector employees. The tax will also apply to all 225 members of parliament. The salaries and allowances together will be taxed. Our fuel allowance will also be taxed. If we own a house, that too will be subject to a tax. The President is holding talks with the Finance Ministry on the possibility of awarding relief. Like it or not, if we do not enter into an agreement with the International Monetary Fund and if we do not prepare a debt repayment program, the Sri Lankan economy will not last even a month. We will be disqualified from entering into any global transaction.
අන්තර්ජාතික වශයෙන් කිසිම දැනදෙනුවකට අපි සුදුසුකම් නොලබන තත්වයට පත් වෙනවා.
In the meantime, National Executive Member of the NPP, Vasantha Samarsnekha, says the unfair tax policy should be withdrawn immediately.
The IMF said reduce the number of state employees and slash salaries. If they slash the salaries, what will happen? The people will go against it. So they used an alternative by taxation. This tax was increased by 600% and then imposed. This is not fair at all. No country in the world follows tax policies that burden the masses. The taxes of other countries and the taxes of our country are very different. In other countries, the people are taxed while giving them some benefits. What is happening in our country is a fraud. These tax rates should be revised. What this government is doing is burdening the general public. If this tax bill is not amended, we will stand with the people of this country to continue this fight.
The International Monetary Fund has approved loans of $4.7 billion to Bangladesh for dispersal starting immediately, making it the first to secure such funds out of 3 South Asian countries that applied last year amid economic trouble. The International Monetary Fund loans are a win for Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina ahead of a general election early next year and will help the country, which has seen a sharp widening of its current account deficit, depreciation of the Taka currency and a decline in its foreign exchange reserves. Bangladesh will get about $3.3 billion under the IMF's extended credit facility and related arrangements, with an immediate disbursement of about $476 million. The IMF Executive Board also approved about $1.4 billion under its newly created Resilience and Sustainability Facility for climate investments for Bangladesh, the first Asian country to access it.
Sri Lanka's election headquarters.
Moving on with more local developments, the National Election Commission is to meet to discuss directives to prevent the abuse of public property for election propaganda. Commissioner General of Elections Saman Sriratnayaka, speaking to Newsfirst, said the officials from state institutions were summoned to the National Election Commission for the meeting. In addition, the heads of media institutions have also been summoned for a meeting on Tuesday the 31st to discuss the relevant media guidelines. Further, the commissioners of all local government institutions have been summoned to the National Election Commission for a meeting on the local government election. In the meantime, the local government election was a matter raised at Tuesday's cabinet briefing.
අනිත් පුවත්පතේ පසුගිය ඉරිදා ඒ කියන්නේ 29 වෙනිදා ප්‍රධාන සිරස්තලෙන් වාර්තා කළා තියෙනවා මැතිවරණ කොමිසමේ ભેදේ නැත්නම් මැතිවරණ කොමිසමේ සමාජිකයෝ අස්වීමේ මෙහෙයුම ජනාධිපති මාධ්‍යාංශයෙන්ද කියලා මැතිවරණ නිරීක්ෂකයෝ මේ පිළිබඳව දැඩි හෙලා දකිමින් කරුණු දක්වලා තිනවා.
ජනාධිපති ලේකම් කාර්යාලයේ විසින් එවැනි කාට හරි සාක්ෂියක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒ
If there is any evidence to prove the President's office was involved, they can be produced to us or the other relevant institutions. This can be taken to court or even the National Election Commission. It can be proven in court if there is evidence. I do not think the President has instructed the President's media division to strategically I inquired about this from the Director General of Government Information as he works under my ministry. The Director General of the Department of Government Information is bound to provide details to the media institutions when required. The Government Information Department has issued a statement clarifying matters or in response to a query made by journalists. It states that the Gazette notice with the signatures of the chairman and other members of the Election Commission required for the commencement of the local government election process had not yet been sent to the government printer, had not yet been sent to the government press for printing. I also looked at the statement made by the Election Commission. It notes that the district returning officers will be handing over the relevant extraordinary gazette to the government printer today. The press notice comes out on the 29th, and he says it was not sent by that day. The Election Commission says it will be sent on the 30th or the following day. Since a clarification had been sought, the Department of Government Information had issued that statement and fallen into trouble.
මුද්‍රණාලයේ වෙත බාර දී ඇත. ඒකට මේ නිවේදනය නිකුත් කරන්නේ 29 වෙනිදා. එතෙක් බාර දීලා නැහැ කියලා එතුමා කියනවා. මැතිවරණ කොමිසම කියනවා ඒක 30 වෙනිදා ඊට පසුවෙනි දින රජයේ මුද්‍රණාලයට බාර දුන්නා කියලා. ඉතින් මම හිතනවා මේ පිළිබඳ අපහැදිලිතාවයක් හරි මොකක් හරි ගැටලුවක් නිසා අපේ ප්‍රවෘත්ති අධ්‍යක්ෂ ජෙනරාල්තුමා ආපු දෙයකට උත්තර දෙන්න ගිහිල්ලා අමාරුවේ වැටිලා තියෙන බවක් තමයි මට හිතෙන්නේ.
Let's now take a look at some of the comments made in the political sphere.
A certain group tried to take away the aspirations after Sri Lanka Podujana Peramana was created, the local government elections were won and a 2/3 majority was secured. Therefore, we had to engage with a conflict of opinion since the very beginning. We left the government to be seated with the opposition. Our vision is to address all the shortcomings and proceed to a new political culture.
වෙච්ච විනාශයන් නිවැරදි කරගෙන අලුත් දේශපාලන සංස්කෘතියකට යන්න. මේ රට මෙතෙන්ට බංකොලොත් කරලා දැම්මේ අපිද?
Did we bring this country to a level of bankruptcy? Did we bring the Rajapaksas? Basil, Gota, Namal, Chichi and others got the license to loot because Mahinda was elected president. He shared it with the family. Who gave Mahinda that license?
එතකොට මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂට ඒ ලයිසන් එක අරන් දුන්නේ කවුද? විපක්ෂයේ කාර්යභාරය හරියට ඉෂ්ට නොකරපු නිසා
The people are with us. The power does not lie with the legislature, military or cabinet. The power lies with the people.
Two people who were arrested for photographing the high security zone of the parliament were remanded until the 7th of February after they were produced to the Kaduwela Magistrate Court. The suspects had trespassed the War Heroes Memorial in the parliament grounds and photographed the parliament. They are residents of Jaffna and Cinnamon Gardens, aged between 22 and 31 years. Your weather update this afternoon. The naval and fishing communities have been advised not to venture into the sea areas around the island. The depression over the southeast and adjoining southwest Bay of Bengal is likely to move west-northwestwards until the evening of 31st of January, then recurve gradually south-southwestwards and cross Sri Lanka's coast in the forenoon of the 1st of February. Very heavy showers, about 100 millimeters, are likely at some places in the eastern, Uva and central provinces and in the Polonnaruwa district. Heavy showers above 100 millimeters are likely at some places in the northwestern and northern provinces and the Anuradhapura district. There is a possibility to increase swell waves off the coast extending from Pothwell to Mannar via Batticaloa, Trincomalee and Kankasanthurei. A Sri Lankan bus driver has been called a hero after he managed to steer the bus with malfunctioning brakes and avoid falling into a precipice. The incident had taken place on Monday morning and the bus belongs to the SLTB operating from Badulla to Colombo via Diathalava.
A hero bus driver told Newsfirst that he realized the brakes were not working when the bus was proceeding past the Viharagala area in Beragala, Haputale at around noon. Around 60 passengers were aboard the bus at the time. He managed to steer the bus along the tricky road to safety without causing any injury.
There
were over 50 people in the bus, including children. The brakes worked even while passing Haputale. It was at the bend near Viharagala that the brakes gave way. To save the lives of the people inside the bus as well as those on the road, I veered the bus off the road without thinking about myself. The bus stopped and the wheel came off. No one was injured, not even a scratch. My leg was bruised a little and not even the bus was damaged.
In some developing international news, the death toll has risen to at least 83 people after a mosque suicide bombing which targeted policemen in the Pakistan province of Peshawar. The mosque is within a high-security police headquarters area and a probe is underway into how the bomber got in. Pakistan's Prime Minister and other leaders have condemned the attack, one of the worst in the country in recent years. The Pakistani Taliban has denied involvement after an initial claim by one of its commanders. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said, quote, "Terrorists want to create fear by targeting those who perform the duty of defending Pakistan," unquote. On Tuesday, rescuers were still scrambling to retrieve worshippers buried in the rubble. A hospital spokesperson confirmed that more than 100 remained wounded. Between 300 and 400 police officers had been in the area at the time. The mosque is in one of the most heavily controlled areas of the city, which includes police headquarters and intelligence and counter-terrorism bureaus. Monday's blast took place during afternoon prayers in the northwestern city, which is near the country's border with Afghanistan. In other international news, US President Joe Biden has ruled out sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, despite renewed calls from Ukrainian officials for air support. Responding to journalists on Monday if the US would be providing the planes, US President Joe Biden replied simply no. His comment comes a day after Germany's leader also ruled out sending fighter jets. Ukraine has said it needs the jets to take control of its airspace in its ongoing war with Russia. F-16 Fighting Falcons are widely considered one of the world's most reliable fighter jets and are used by other countries such as Belgium and Pakistan. They would be a significant upgrade on the Soviet-era fighting jets Ukraine is currently using, which were made before the country declared independence from the USSR more than 30 years ago. However, Biden has repeatedly rebuffed Ukraine's pleas for the jets, instead focusing on providing military support in other areas. The US announced last week that it would supply Kyiv with 31 Abrams tanks, with the UK and Germany also pledging similar support. And that's a wrap of this edition of Lunchtime News here on TV1. For the Newsfirst team and Mariam Ganujaya, good day to you, take care and stay safe.